Hey, Masters cohort. This is Caitlin, Ashley, and Dylan. This session we have been researching the population of religious minority students. This information was all new to us, so we hope that you are able to learn alongside us about religious minority college students.
To answer the question of who are religious minority students, there's a broad definition that states religious minority students are a group numerically inferior to the rest of the population that possess ethnic, religious, and/or linguistic characteristics differing from the rest of the population. But to give you a better picture within higher education, we wanted to give you examples of religious minority students today. So, Bowman, Felix, Ortiz define Buddhists, Hindus, Jews, Muslims, Protestants, and anyone who doesn't identify with any religious as religious minority students. For Gray specifically, we chose to focus on someone who has specific denominations that are different than the minority and the majority here. And this you will hear about later in our interview section of our presentation.
And now I'm going to talk to you guys about the student needs in the community. And the first topic is basically the similar to the community as a whole. And dealing with this, the students in the religious minority are given the same opportunities to express who they are while being at school. There are people who don't agree with what they believe, but they can still be who they are. Colleges are able to provide the students areas to start their own clubs, whether it is a religious reason or any type of reason, but as long as it's within the school rules. Being a non-religious school allows for the students to be who they want to be and seek out what they want their lives to look like. The students need to feel welcome into the college atmosphere that allows them to practice the diversity and inclusion. And now with the difference in community as a whole, the difference is the religious minority and the rest of the students that are at the campus are geared towards Christian development, even if they don't specifically say it. So basically what happens is because of this, the diversity and inclusion aren't the priority there, so it brings into a struggle for the students who are the minority. The students will feel oppressed and feel that they are forced to be more Christian-minded, and this will cause issues. But being at a private school, it makes it harder for those students who are really want to be themselves, because private schools, they more lean towards a Christian atmosphere, and they want you to lean towards that and not kind of go off on to another type of religions. Students are part of a religious minority and will struggle to fit into college if they can determine to adjust to what everyone else is doing, or they can keep to themselves and receive criticism from around them. Now to talk to you about the institutional impact based in the higher education, the faculty in the higher education are put in a tough situation because they don't want to approach students about their religion, so they don't feel alienated or feel that the staff is invading their constitutional rights. The only thing that the faculty really can do to provide campus for them on campus is to give them space and allow them to gather and be able to talk about their religion and their beliefs. Everyone has the opportunity to start, like I said in the last one, they have the chance to start their own groups and just be who they want to be. But the lawful goals, and they do have goals that they want to set, but then there are threats that they will perceive within that, with people being criticism about what they believe. Everyone should get the same opportunity whether or not the school agrees with the religion or not. They can pick one side that they must, but they cannot pick one side, but they need to be neutral. And in the book, it talks about in 1999, there is a report made on how religion in the higher education has brought an increase to the outcome of the students. Students have a religion are more likely to have less depression, and a lot of them have great health, but along with that, they have happiness, purpose, meaning, and hope in life. With the satisfaction, students will become more involved in collegiate activities like exercising, attending events held by the school, and doing community service to get their school noticed and see that there are people that are good at colleges and they just don't want to party. This helps advertise the school and get more students that want to come to the school because of the people doing the services around the community, and this just helps the environment altogether. The next part is the difficult barriers for students. In dealing with that, colleges and universities have moved away from religion, but it still fills the campuses. Those who are not the majority will have religious struggles while they are at school. Students of the minority religion will experience barriers that will inhibit their religious and spiritual development as they go through their years of college. Those who are the religious minority are able to have excused absences for classes, but those who are non-Christian students are left to deal with classes because they do not have a specific holiday that they get to celebrate. Quay and Harper both talk about the different religious holidays students will celebrate. Wiska, celebrated by the Buddhists, Diwali, celebrated by Hindus, and holy days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, celebrated by the Jewish students. Yes, there is Christmas for the Christian students, but this is during the winter break for everyone else when they also have school off.
I'm going to be talking to you guys about the educational needs of religious minority students. The educational needs of these students vary for each student. However, I think it can be said for the whole population that they need a supportive educational environment. I read an article that performed a study on religious minority students in high school and their perceptions and feelings of how they were treated in light of their religious choices. One student specifically recalled a time when she asked permission to take an exam early or late in order to participate in a religious service on the day of the exam. She was denied this request and was told that schools do not recognize religious holidays for anyone. This study concluded that there is reportedly an unspoken assumption that everyone is Christian and will readily participate in Christian clubs and celebrate Christian holidays. This is not the picture of a supportive environment for religious minority students to learn and further their education to the best of their ability. Religious minority students' educational needs have a huge significance in higher education. Having a supportive environment is especially important in higher education because students are often away from their home environment, which is a lot of times students' strongest support system. The distance from their home life leaves a gap in the support they feel while at school. Mayhew, Bowman, and Rockenbach note that not only are religious minority students working through academic and social transitions, but they are also living in a world where their college or university is set up to naturally favor those of Christian faith. Mjaulen emphasizes the important role that professors and faculty play in the lives of students. The connections that are made between students and faculty are vital in establishing a supportive academic environment. In our text, Quay and Harper explain that for religious minority students, having a supportive educational environment helps them to combat the conflicting ideologies by which they are surrounded. Working through the cognitive disequilibrium that they're facing has the potential to build their critical thinking skills.
For our next section, we're going to talk about social needs of the religious minority students. With this section, understanding the unique educational and social needs of religious minority students is imperative when considering ways that higher education institutions could address them. We must understand them in order to fix the issues. The interview we conducted asked a question about what their school could do to accommodate for whatever needs they could think of. They said, "The school has been great. It's the people who aren't always that way." She went on to explain that everything was great, but there are a few that don't seem very accepting, but she believes it is because they focus on the superficial and/or haven't taken the time to get to know her. Thankfully, her experience was very mild compared to what it could have been. An example of a school accommodating for the needs of religious minority students is the University of Minnesota. I read an article and it talked about how the school was highly recommended to provide space for cultural centers on their campus once the idea was brought up into full light. The student affairs professionals in this institution learned from this as they got input from the students, and in regard to higher education as a whole, they could also be the driving force behind these changes and make the process easier for students.
To continue on the needs of the students, in the educational needs, most Christian holidays are shared as a holiday on the academic calendar, but those on the non-Christian religion have holidays on days that they are still required to attend school. This gets to them to the debate whether they want to attend class or celebrate their religious holiday. The students that are in the minority don't get the same opportunities as the rest of the students. They all have a different point to revolve around the Christian religion, whether they like it or not. The minority students, when dealing with these situations, are put in the best supportive environment to help them further their education in a positive manner. And now with the social needs, it deals with the students that vary depending on what type of college and university they attend. If they go to a secular college, people will judge who they are and not receive extra benefits if they can't make it to class because of the holiday. Students are required to go to every class when they are required. In a private school, there are students who don't believe in the same God as most private schools do. And in doing this puts in a different perspective of what other students put on them. And in doing this, it's a threat more to who they will become if they don't want to change who they are. In doing that, they really don't get to know who the person is. They just base them off what they believe rather than who the real person is, even if they're part of the minority religion. Everyone should be given the opportunity to express who they are, and if they don't agree with what they believe, then they should help see why they don't agree.
So for this section, we're going to talk about the different theories and their application to religious minority students. As we studied them in class, a few aligned with the information of this section of students. For starters, a theory that fits well is Chickering's theory of identity development from Evans, Forney, Guido, Patton, and Wren. This theory has 7 vectors, and religious minority students fit best within the 5th one, establishing identity. For this vector, there is an acknowledgement that there are differences in identity development based on gender, ethnic background, and other factors. For religious minority students, they are trying to come to terms with their identity in their religion, so this vector comes into play for them. They are trying to find comfort in their own skin and one's social and cultural heritage. This could be an issue for religious minority students because they might have had to face discrimination over their lifetime that can impact the way they view themselves. Another theory that fits with this group is Park's faith development theory. Parks points out that faith is validated through lived experience, making itself public in everyday acts of decision, obedience, and courage. For religious minority students, their faith can differ than the population around them, so the mentoring communities Parks proposed come into play. Parks argued that the higher education community could be a place for young adults to benefit greatly from with use of mentoring relationships. As these religious minority students enter into higher education in the realm of it, having a mentor could play a significant role in their development. If they are paired with someone who is in their faith, the connection would be stronger and their development would be further enhanced. Religious minority students just want to belong, and this theory points out that through the mentoring communities, they are submerged in a network of belonging in which their imaginations and goals are supported. Though these are a few theories that fit with our religious minority students, one theory does not fit the best, and that is sexual identity development theory. This theory focuses on the student's development in 6 stages. The theory does not fit with our religious minority students, because it focuses on the sexual core values and their religious core values as they impact the student's sexual identity. For religious minority students, their focus is not on their sexual identity, but on their religious development. Sexual identity development is important, but in the discussion of religious minority students, we believe this theory does not fit well with the information we have found and provided for you.
So to bring this back to our focus of higher education for these students and to make this pretty relevant, I'm going to talk about some recommendations for colleges and universities and their administrators. Our text of Quay and Harper dedicated a whole chapter to discussing students of religious minorities. The text was so helpful in specifically connecting religious minority students and higher education professionals. Bowman and Smedley state that Christian privilege and religious discrimination occurs in American higher education, even on secular campuses. Religious minority students are a population that deserves more attention and action in order to create a plan for fair and equal treatment and opportunities within higher education institutions. In discussing recommendations for higher education institutions and administrators, I will specifically address connecting students with the institution, enhancing student learning, and enriching their personal development. To the institution is one of the first goals of higher education with all students and population groups. This is why so much time is spent on student orientation programs and events. Administrators want incoming students to feel valued and cared for. Students who develop connections with faculty, staff, and fellow students are more likely to feel more connected to the institution they are attending. Bowman and Smedley state that according to Julerit and Schreiner, student satisfaction is defined as a student's perception of an institution's effectiveness. This effectiveness is directly related to whether students' expectations have been met. Connecting a student to an institution is a key factor in meeting student expectations. Quay and Harper express that religious minority students often face spiritual struggle because of the lack of support around them. These students often do not have others who share their beliefs to encourage and support them throughout their college years. Students who have religious or spiritual support from faculty members or those who hold similar religious beliefs are more likely to grow spiritually. Students may also feel disconnected because of the lack of services for religious minorities. Quay and Harper also suggest that institutions should sponsor multi-faith programming where students and faculty can feel comfortable in open dialogue about various religions and their practices. So connecting students to the institution, there also comes enhancing a student's learning. As I talked about earlier, religious minority students have educational needs specific to their population. It's important that institutions recognize this in order to push religious minority students to reach their full academic potential. Because of the challenges religious minority students face, it is possible that their learning may become stagnant. As higher education professionals, we cannot let this become reality. For those of you who have been in the higher education program since the beginning, remember back to the History of Higher Education course with me for a moment. For those of you who did not take this class or were not in the program, let me give you a quick rundown in higher ed history. When higher education first began, its purpose was to train Christian clergy members. Colleges and universities actually discriminated against non-Christian applicants, and this continued to happen well into the 20th century. Bowman and Smedley also note that Christian privilege is common among U.S. colleges and universities and is often unquestioned. This Christian privilege includes things such as scheduling of the academic calendar around Christian holidays and the lack of consideration of dietary needs for non-Christian religious observances. My first suggestion to administrators in higher education institutions would be to become well educated in various religions and religious practices, especially those that affect students on their campus. Secondly, administrators and institutions should be considerate of all religious practices and holidays. While I am not one for political correctness, winter break is better than Christmas break in considering all students and their religious affiliations or lack thereof. Institutions can also take steps in becoming more accommodating to the dietary needs of certain religions. Many people know that during the Christian season of Lent, some Catholics or others will not eat meat except fish on Fridays. Institutions should become educated on customs similar to this that are practiced by other religious minority groups in order to provide broader, stronger service to all students. So after talking about connecting students to the institution and enhancing their student learning, the last thing that I'm going to talk about is enhancing their personal development. Students do not simply come to college in search of a degree in an academic education anymore. Students are expected to grow holistically during their time at college. Wang states that students should not have to adjust to fit their higher education system, but that the higher education system should have to adjust to fit its students. Institutions are continually improving to develop their students into well-rounded individuals. Institutions recognize that they are developing students holistically and not just academically. In discussing the institution's role in students' personal development, I'll be reiterating some of what Dylan talked about earlier in regards to institutional impact. It is important for higher education institutions to support religious and non-religious students in their holistic development process. It's also important that they provide opportunities for students to express and practice their religious beliefs and customs. Quay and Harper state that religiosity is linked positively with mental and emotional health. This link connects with life satisfaction, happiness, purpose, and meaning, hope, optimism, and lower numbers of depression and anxiety. Students who partake in spiritual enhancing activities are also more likely to exercise, attend cultural events, and participate in community service. Quay and Harper go on to say that by fostering a more favorable environment for religious happenings, institutions can contribute to students' development, sense of belonging, and overall satisfaction with college.
As we wrap up our presentation on religious minority students, we hope you all have learned new information about this group in relation to higher education. For each of us, we all learned our own takeaways for this project. For me, I learned how important one religious minority student's voice could be in the event of change. For accommodations to happen effectively, a student must be bold and speak up. In reading about the University of Minnesota's example, like I told you, I learned how fast change can happen when many students of the same religious minority come together to see a change through.
And some of that I've learned is that there will always be people around us who have different religious minorities, but just because they believe in something different doesn't mean we should treat them differently. Even if we have the same minority, it doesn't mean that we're always going to agree on the same thing, like what is right and what is wrong, or how to interpret what we are learning in school. We will always have our differences no matter where we go, but in the end we must work together to create a better world around us.
There are numerous things that I learned about religious minority students as a group and their educational needs. Perhaps what I've taken away from this project most is how a student's religion is not their only identity. While their religious beliefs are a part of who they are not solely defined by this. While higher education institutions should accommodate to religious minority students, they should also be sensitive to the fact that their religion does not define their entire identity. There are other factors that play into their character, personality, and life as a student. I learned that balance is key in understanding the college student as a whole person. It is also important for higher education professionals to understand that each student is different, even if they are in the same student population. For example, although there may be a group of Muslim students on campus, each student is different and not defined exclusively by their religious beliefs and practices.
Lastly, the discussion question related to our presentation relates to applying theories to the challenges religious minority students face. And this will be in relation to the different fields of higher education we decide to work in, or in any area we decide to work in. Our DQ is this: how would you practically apply a theory that we talked about in our presentation or an outside research and learn about in this class to combat challenges that religious minority students may face in your anticipated field of work? Thank you all for watching. Our next few slides just give you our resources and references.